Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Naomi, and today I want to talk to you about the 3 big mistakes that people usually make when trying to do headstand. Now, generally speaking, I don't love using the word mistake when it comes to yoga because I think that, more often than not, it's not so much about mistakes as not always knowing how to get into a pose in a way that will most support you, right? The most effective way. But these are 3 really big ones that I see a lot in headstand and that can make your headstand not only harder and less supported, but even at times borderline unsafe. So, first one, and this is my biggest pet peeve when I see people teaching headstand. Very biggest pet peeve is the basket, right? It is the head basket. Okay, now the head basket looks a little bit like this. So if you've ever done a headstand, usually it's instructed interlace your fingers and then place your hands behind your head like a basket, right? Like you're holding your head in a basket, okay? Now the problem with that is that when you interlace your fingers and put your hands behind your head, you don't have a lot of support. The problem is, on top of not having a lot of support, your fingers are interlaced, so they're connected together. And so if something sort of goes off, right, or awry, and you're upside down, your fingers are stuck together and you don't have as much ability to get yourself out of the pose as quickly as you might want to and as safely as you might want to, okay? So I'm not a big fan of the basket, okay? I am much more of a fan of interlacing your fingers, tucking that bottommost pinky finger in, and then making a fist, okay? So now your fingers are still interlaced here, but it gives you a lot more control and a lot more support. And headstand is an inversion where you actually want a lot more support and a lot more control, okay? Because the way that you use the muscles of your upper arms and your shoulders, and even the muscles in your neck, are super important to a stable and solid foundation of your headstand, okay? So no head baskets, right? None of this business. Instead, you want to interlace your fingers, tuck that bottommost pinky finger in, okay? And then when you go to lift your arms up, you would place your head not in between your 2 hands, but actually right at that lowest part of your forearm, okay? So you've got a lot more power there, whereas you don't have a lot of power in your hands and your elbows are going to wobble a little bit more. Okay, so number 1 is the head basket. We need to do away with the head basket and create more of a fist for support, for more control in your arms and in your shoulders. So that's my number 1 pet peeve that I really think we all need to shift when it comes to headstand. And as teachers, stop teaching. Okay, number 2 in the mistakes that we tend to make when it comes into teaching headstand is that in headstand, a lot of times, and it's not always in the teaching, it's more in the doing of headstand because we're not taught. But a lot of times what I see is people kicking up into headstand, right? Kicking up into headstand, particularly at the wall. Now, doing headstand at the wall is not necessarily a huge problem. I think that the wall can pose some problems because it gives you a false sense of security in terms of how much strength you need to use in the pose. But I'm not opposed to having the wall behind you because, nobody really wants to fall backwards out of any pose ever, right? So, I get that. But if you kick up into headstand, right, if you're like flinging yourself up, you're placing a lot more spring and a lot more asymmetrical weight on your head and your neck. Okay, so think about it this way, okay? When you jump, like if you're gonna jump at all, I'll get this out of the way. If you're gonna jump, okay, what sustains that spring is your quads and in your calves and in your low back a little bit, right? If your head is on the ground, right, because again, this is about where you're bearing weight and where you're pushing from. If your head is on the ground and you kick a leg up, okay, where are you going to sustain that spring, right, that push? Mostly in your shoulders, your head, and your neck. Okay, now your shoulders can sustain that. Your shoulders are probably plenty strong, okay, and probably capable of it. However, your head and your neck aren't really designed for that, right? That's not what they're there for. So when you kick up into a headstand, right, meaning like you're pushing off with one leg really hard to get up, then you're putting a lot more weight where you don't have the support. So kicking up into headstand is really not your best bet for getting into your pose as safely and as and with the amount of control that you need for a pose like headstand. Okay, another way to think of it is this, okay? If you were gonna do a handstand or even downward facing dog, okay? In downward facing dog, you've got your hands on the floor and your arms for support in your shoulders, but you're not bearing any weight in your head. So you have a lot more mobility, right? You can move a lot more, okay? Now, and I'll just show the difference between the two. So this is your downward facing dog. Lots of mobility. You can move back and forth. It's no problem, right? Now, forearms are on the floor. So it's like dolphin pose. And this is sort of your prep for a forearm stand. You have a little bit more mobility. You can still move forward and back, but it's limited, right? Because you've changed the distance between your shoulder and the floor, and you've added an element of support. So now you've got your entire forearm on the floor. So you lose some of that mobility, right? You have more strength and more steadiness, but you lose some of the mobility. No big deal, right? In a headstand, as soon as you put your head on the floor, you've now added one more layer of foundation, okay? One more place of support. But it also decreases your mobility significantly. Okay, so if your head is on the floor and you go to kick up, right, you don't have as much give in your shoulders. Your shoulders can only do so much. So of course the burden of the work has to go into your neck, right, your cervical vertebra and your head. Okay, and you know, that's not what they're designed for. Okay, so kicking up isn't necessarily going to injure you, but it's also not going to do you any favors. Okay, so that's number 2. No more kicking up into headstand. Now that doesn't mean that you can't hop up, right? You can certainly give yourself a little hop, but no kicking up one leg at a time. Okay, so the last one, my last, number three, and this is another really big one, I believe, and that's why it's number 3, is that we tend to extend the legs a little bit too quickly. Okay, so what that means is if you are tucking up into headstand, and I talk about all 3 of these things in 2 other headstand videos that have come out this month. So how to get into a headstand safely, and also, you know, ways to get yourself into, you know, like the progression for getting into headstand. I have 2 other videos that you can check out that teach you how to do headstand. But this, I want to be really clear, a lot of times, and I'm going to show both ways, a lot of times people extend their legs too quickly in headstand and make more work for themselves than they need. So you get up into like your little tuck, and then people like stretch their legs from there. But if you'll look at my legs aren't completely vertical over my head right now. Here's vertical. Okay, but it's really hard to feel vertical if you're starting from this tuck and then you stretch your legs and then you have to pull back. Okay, so not only is it harder, but it can be scarier too, particularly if you're newer to headstand, right? So if you're newer to headstand and you're pulling yourself up in that way, okay, then you're putting yourself in a place where you're not getting all the way up, you're not lining your body up in the most effective way, and you're making headstand infinitely harder for yourself, okay? So what you want to aim for is getting your knees more vertical over your hips and then extending your legs straight, okay? I'll show you what that progression looks like, and I go into greater depth in other videos, so just to give you an idea of what that looks like here, okay? I come into my little tuck, my little egg stand. Then I'm going to draw my knees in and take my knees straight up over my hips. So my heels drop down towards my butt. Now I'm squeezing my butt a lot too and pulling up. Then I can extend my legs, and my legs are vertical. I know, I can feel it, I can tell. Because there's a big difference from being here and being here, where my legs are slightly forward if my hips and my butt is back. Okay, so again, in order to get to that place, I've got to take my knees from this egg stand place back and up. And this is the scariest part, right? Dropping my heels down towards my butt and making my knees go vertical before I extend. But it also lines me up in the most effective way to make headstand simpler and easier, okay? So I'm going to run through those one more time, okay? Number 1, no more head baskets. Instead, create a fist for yourself so that you have more power and more access to the strength of your arms and your shoulders. Number 2, no kicking up into headstand, Okay, this is not a handstand, it's not forearm stand. Headstand, you have a lot more on the floor, and so you need more control. Okay, and kicking up, it's not a lot of control. And number 3, no more premature extension. Okay, no more premature extension. Okay, get your knees vertical over your hips and then extend your legs straight up. And that will give you a lot more simplicity, right? It'll make it a lot easier to be in your headstand, right, than trying to find it with your legs kind of out in front of you, okay? So those are the top 3 mistakes that I think people tend to make that make headstand harder and less enjoyable, and 3 ways that you can very easily solve those minor mistakes to tweak your headstand so it feels a little bit safer, a little bit more solid, a lot more supported, and quite honestly, easier. Okay, if you want more in-depth tutorials, you can check out my How to Get into Headstand Safely video, which is sort of a progression of the poses that can help build you up into headstand, and also some of the other video, which is really about the tips and tools that you need to get ready for a headstand so that you are making sure that you are getting into it in the best possible way. Okay, so hopefully this has been really useful. Definitely check out those other 2 videos if you have not yet seen them. And as always, thank you for hanging out with me on the mat today. I hope this was useful for you. Please let me know what you think of these tips in the comments below, and let me know if it helps support you get into a headstand feeling more safe and solid and supported. And thanks for tuning in, as always, and for hanging out with me on the mat. I look forward to being back here again with you really soon. All right, until then, bye. Did you enjoy this headstand video? If you did, and if you want more videos like this month in my online yoga studio, the Conscious Healthy Collective, and in its sister studio, the Collective Light, I am doing practices devoted to strengthening, stabilizing, and supporting headstand all month long. So if you enjoyed this class and you want to get more practices with headstand in them so that you can feel more confident in this pose, upside down, in your core, and just, doing the fun yoga that you like to do, definitely check out my online yoga studio, the Conscious Healthy Collective and the Collective Light. You can get the links for those in the comments below, and if you really enjoyed this, you can try these 2 studios out, one of the 2, for half off this month if you type in the code HEADSTAND at checkout. So that's 50% off your first month for an entire month, just to check things out and see what you think of all these other awesome headstand poses. So I hope that I will see you on the mat, in the collective, or in light this month, rocking your headstands. And until then, I look forward to being back in the mat with you really soon. All right? Bye.